I was at a complete, this microphone is too short. 1 moment.
Sorry.
That's okay.
You're taller than me.
Yeah. How's this? Good? I was at a complete loss for words, frozen, as I stood in front of this Argentinian man, weathered, forlorn, who was cocking his head and staring at me quizzically. Mouth was agape, cotton ball dry, realization seeping through every single ounce of my body, with nothing but a quiet croak coming out of my mouth. Nadie, lo siento, I said. No one, I'm sorry. Minutes before, I found myself amidst a group of petite, elderly Argentinian women who were walking somberly in a circle. This was January 2014, and we were in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in one of the main, very historic plazas in the city called Plaza de Mayo. With these women were their grown children, their husbands, their families, all of whom were together, marching in solidarity, holding banners, photos, chanting. Many of them were crying quietly. Some of them, many of whom were men, were sobbing and wailing audibly. It was a very powerful, very somber moment, and I couldn't help but cry as I walked with them. Now, how I got to this moment is the story of a traveler wanting to walk in the footsteps of another culture, and quite literally, I did. As a traveler, and not a tourist, especially not an American tourist while at it, I was determined during my 3 months of backpacking around South America to really assimilate with local culture, to know its history, to eat with locals, talk with locals, and if I were to fall in love with a local, I wouldn't have been opposed to it. Now, getting to know the local culture of Buenos Aires is the opposite of difficult. It means, for starters, starting dinner at 10 or 11 p.m. at night and sipping the smoothest red wine while eating the most savory, most delicious steak you have ever eaten. Keep in mind, I don't even like steak. When I'm in San Francisco, I try to be a vegetarian, as we San Franciscans tend to do. Getting to know local culture meant cafe culture and people watching, and it meant while walking to the cafes, I would literally stop in my tracks because I would see so many good-looking men. I mean, really, this Latin and European mix was just hola. And then, when night fell, we would go dancing at 3 a.m. earliest. And as a mix of everything that I just mentioned, it meant learning a few local words like chamuchero, which means sweet talker and cannot always be trusted. But all jokes aside, getting to know the local culture of Buenos Aires that I loved so much was exactly that. I loved its love and its passion. It was palpable. But as I dug a little bit deeper into its local culture and history, what I got to know more was about love's twin sister, loss. Between 1976 to 1983, Argentina was ruled by a military junta, and they were in an era known as the Dirty War. During this war, scores of young adults and others who opposed the military regime, or they were accused of acting in subversive activities, they disappeared. They simply went missing, gone without a trace. They were known as los desaparecidos, or the disappeared. And their mothers convened and took to the plaza in nonviolent protest to call attention to the matter and to also demand answers. They wore white scarves on their head, white to signify peace and also so that they could identify each other. And they also sewed in the names of their children onto their white scarves. I went to a museum dedicated to these mothers, Las Madres, and I stood face to face with their portraits as the pain from their own eyes seared into my own heart. Now, every Thursday since 1977 at 3:30 p.m. on the dot, let me say that again, every Thursday since 1977 at 3:30 p.m. on the dot, Las Madres have been marching in solidarity for their children, although now they know exactly what happened. It turns out that the military had been kidnapping their children in the dead of the night, drugging them, flying them over the River Plata, and pushing them to their watery deaths. So, fast forward 37 years, here I am in Plaza de Mayo, 3:30 p.m. on the dot on a Thursday. And I'm with Las Madres and their families, and All of these people have gone through this terrible, atrocious tragedy. There are about 60 people there. At the beginning of the march, I stood at the center monument, and I observed very quietly, paying my respects. Then about 10 minutes passed, and the procession kept going past me, and I happened to make eye contact with a few of these Madres that I had seen in the portraits in the museum the day before. Those very powerful human connections that I made, in addition to everyone's collective tears, somehow formed this rope that kind of lassoed me in and pulled me into the march. And I really couldn't help myself. It was as if I was in a trance or hypnotized, and I just walked into the march. And I started marching with them for about 30 minutes. At the end of the march, I returned back to that center monument, and I was completely lost in my own thoughts. This is when that weathered, forlorn Argentinian man ran up to me, and breathlessly he asked me, "Hola, perdón, tengo una pregunta." Hello, excuse me, I have a question. Sí, I responded, just jolted back to reality. It was here where he asked me, "¿A quién persiste? Who did you lose?" This is when that tidal wave of realization just completely hit me, and I stammered, "Nadie, lo siento." He kind of gave me a, huh, type of response, slowly nodded his head, and then walked away. He wasn't bitter, he wasn't angry, but he was definitely trying to process what he had just seen, and he could have been walking back to a group of people who had sent him to inquire, or not, I'm not sure, because I stood there and I was just flush with mortification. It was at that moment when I was zapped with humility that, although I had the best intentions when unintentionally joining Las Madres, I realized that their grief was not mine to claim as my own. That although love and loss are universally felt, this was one piece of local culture that I, as a visitor, could not share. If I had lost no one, nadie, and Las Madres had lost those who had been their everything. Thank you.